Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of Calabasas and beyond. This is the August 20th meeting of the Calabasas Planning Commission. And we have a one-item agenda before us this evening. And it's got a lot of complexity, but we're going to deal with it accordingly. And we have an agenda before us. I will say that we're operating under the remote communications provisions that were enabled by the state government. Governor Newsom issued an order, and we're meeting by Zoom, as you know, and we try to be as open as we possibly can in making everybody comfortable with this method of communications. So if there are some hiccups along the way, do bear with us, and we'll do our best to get to everybody on their points. And I've called the meeting to order, and I will identify without calling roll that there is only one commissioner who is on excused absence, Commissioner CEQA. Otherwise, all the commissioners are here. And I will actually lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag, and we probably have a symbol of that. So if you don't have to stand, but put your hand over your heart and
repeat
with me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one
nation under God,
indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you all. Is there any addition or correction to the agenda that we have before us, staff?
Yes, we do. We want to note that inadvertently we included the meeting notes from your July 16th meeting, but we did not agenda for your consideration tonight the meeting notes from July 16th. So you have a document that will not be considered this evening.
Thank you. That doesn't really affect the agenda, though, because I don't see that on the agenda. Is it on the agenda?
It is not. It is not.
I mean,
so it's
just
in case you're confused, that's the reason for the confusion. It was just an oversight by us.
It's not a problem. It's just I want to make sure that anybody who's looking at the agenda realizes that we have an approved agenda. And if I can call for Michael, you had your hand up. Did you have something?
Yeah, it was exactly on that, because we had minutes from July 16th that weren't on the agenda.
Well, then I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And second from? Who seconded?
I did.
Michael. Okay.
Yes.
Hearing no objections, we'll operate on this agenda. And moving on, are there any announcements or introductions that need to be made by the commissioners or staff? Seeing none, let's open up the possibility for oral communications. And now this is public comment that is for citizens wishing to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak, please identify yourself to our staff people. I think it's probably Judy Gilly that's going to keep an eye for you. Is there anything, Judy?
If you're part of the attendees and you would like to speak, please raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button. We'll wait a moment. I have a hand up from 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. I'll take the first one. Is Janet Spinks?
Oh, that's
That's
for the item.
Judy, this is, and people who are asking to be heard, this is for items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to be heard on an agendized item, which is our item number 2, then I'd be happy to recognize you, but I don't believe we have anybody that is not dealing with this project this evening. Is that correct?
I'm going to lower all the hands now again, and we'll ask the question again. Is there anyone wanting to speak for something that's not on the agenda? I don't see any.
I didn't think so. Okay, so we'll move on to from oral communications and public comment to the consent item, which is the approval of the minutes of July 9th. Are there any additions or corrections that the commissioners or staff has to those minutes?
Yes. On item number 1, consent items, on the second line, I think it should read to approve the Planning Commission minutes of June 18th, not agenda.
Okay.
And then on the lower, near the bottom of that page, it says, looking, our recommendations were just to look forward to further discussion. We actually several of us made some very detailed recommendations, so I don't think this is really
They're missing?
complete. Yeah, I mean, we made some very specific recommendations, and we are looking forward to future workshops, but.
If you could simply send those on to me, we can adjust these minutes accordingly and look at them at our next regularly scheduled meeting. But again, if everyone on the commission assisted us by getting anything that you see off an agenda to us, we're happy to include it, modify it, and recirculate a document. So this is no problem for us to do. Send it to us and we'll take care of it at the next regularly scheduled meeting.
And typically the cure for this kind of thing is that we mention in these minutes of tonight's meeting the details that you agree to put into the previous minutes, and they're noted in these minutes as either a correction to the previous July 9th meeting minutes, or they will be in tonight's minutes in order to keep the record straight for everybody who might want to look at that in the future. And John, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, very, very briefly. We've gone from detailed minutes over the years to much more generic minutes. In something like this, since it was really an overview of the ridgeline situation, there's really two ways to handle it. One is simply to say, following their discussion, the Planning Commission made several important recommendations, period.
And that's fine.
And if anyone wants to look up what the recommendations are, they are a matter of record in the archive.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all I wanted. Something saying that we had made recommendations.
Right.
It makes it sound like we didn't make any.
Right. So that's otherwise you got to go. If you just put in 4 of the 8 important recommendations, then it's incomplete.
Right.
So my recommendation, no pun intended, is simply to say we made several important recommendations, period, and they're archived in Granicus.
Well, the two areas you're talking about, the specifics and the general recognition of what we need to do. I'm going to suggest that without an objection that I get to say it's so ordered. They used to do that on the Board of Supervisors, whenever they wanted to gloss over something, but obviously we're trying to include something. So by all means. And Peter, you have your hand up there. Are there any other additions or corrections to the minutes?
Yeah, just one other correction. Our meeting was the second Wednesday of the month, so I believe that's a special meeting, and we adjourned to a regular meeting.
We've been in transition, and I mean, so noted, but we've been in transition from a 7 o'clock start time as our regular, and every other time start or day, frankly, is a special meeting. Did this actually create that? I don't know if that's the case.
No, we are officially a 6 o'clock start time right now on the first and third Thursdays.
Okay, then let's just 6 minutes.
And if the commission recalls, when we went back to actually change the start time, Tom Bartlett, the city planner, noticed that when the city council had changed their dates to the first and the fourth Wednesdays of the month, they never changed the planning commission dates, which did change at that time. So it could be that you were a regular or a special. My recommendation is allow us to take these minutes back and rework them with the comments that we have here, and then bring them back on the 16th with a little more specificity with regard to the important recommendations that you took. That would be my desire.
With my commission's agreement, that will also be so ordered. I'm teasing, but you know what to fix. And thank you guys for catching those issues. And actually, it's a policy issue as well as a factual issue. So thank you. And we're not going to vote on those minutes. We'll continue them to the next meeting for the update. And then we'll vote on them again, make sure they're right. All right. Next item of business is, in fact, a public hearing on file number 20919-002, which is actually, that's the variance I just read, but site plan review number 2019-002 and variance number 2019-002. A request for a site plan review and variance to demolish an existing legal non-conforming 1,772 square foot, two-story single-family residence and construct a new 3,660 square foot, two-story single-family residence with an attached two-car garage. And the project request requires a request for variances, plural, to exceed the maximum permitted site coverage and encroach within both sides and rear yard setback requirements. And the staff, I'm sure, will report on the rest of the subject matter in describing this. And I know that we have an applicant and probably a team of folks who are involved with the application. And I'll tell you at this point, because of the Zoom meeting structure, we might have to do a little juggling on what we believe is a fair amount of time for everybody to be heard and that we can, as commissioners, get the full story. So do bear with us, but we hope to be able to provide for sufficient time for everybody to get their projects and their issues on the table, so we have a chance to consider all of that. But at this point, I will, unless I have a legal requirement of some kind, Matthew, or a staff recommendation, we'll move on to the staff report. And who's going to give that?
Associate Planner Brenda Magana is going to give the report tonight.
Yeah. Good evening, Chair. Let me pull up my screen here.
I have one quick question. The viewers on CTV will be able to see both this, perfect, the speakers and the exhibits. Is that correct? Like we're seeing.
Yes.
Thank you. Just want to reassure everybody.
And the full packet that is under review by the Planning Commission was also on the city's website.
Right.
Under Community Development or under Planning Commission. So the full information is available on the website as well.
Okay.
Take it away, Brenda.
All right. Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. The item before you tonight is Site Plan Review 2019-002 and Variance 2019-002. This is a request for a site plan review and variance to demolish an existing legal non-conforming 1,772 square foot, two-story single-family residence and construct a new 3,660 square foot, two-story single-family residence with an attached 424 square foot garage and a 61 square foot storage area. The project involves requests for 4 variances. One is to exceed the permitted site coverage, to encroach in both the required side yard setbacks and encroach into the rear yard setback. The project is located at 4602 Park Mirasol and is located within the residential single-family zoning district. Before I get into the staff report, I want to go ahead and go over a few of the clarifications. You guys received an addendum to your staff report and resolution, and I just want to go over a few bullet points. According to the County Assessor's Office, 4615 Park Mirasol has a house size of 4034. According to the county office, the 4617 Park Mirasol has a house size of 2,617 square feet. 4610 has a house size of 2,297 square feet. And the average house size for Park Mirasol is now 2,532 square feet. Lastly, page 11 of the staff report notes that the side yard setback is 5 feet 6 and 5/8 inches. It should be 4 feet 6 and 5/8 inches. And all these adjustments have been made accordingly to the variance findings contained in the amended PC resolution. Just to go over the project description a little more in detail, this is a demolition again of a 2-story legal non-conforming residence and the construction of 3,660 square foot single family residence with a 424 square foot garage and 61 square foot storage area. And it's internal to the garage, so it's access from the garage. Construction of the site also includes a little bit of hardscapes with new concrete driveway and stepping stone, covered patio and porches, open air balcony and roof deck, retaining wall extension of about 3 feet maximum in height, and landscaping throughout the site. There are 2 applications here for review. The site plan review is for new construction of a single family residence, and the 4 variances I mentioned earlier include the side yard setback, which will be reduced from 10 feet to 4 feet 5 inches. The side yard setback to the west reduced from 10 feet to 0. The rear yard setbacks reduced from 20 to 15 and 6 1/8 inches. And the site coverage requirement is proposed at 61% and the required is 50% maximum.
Brenda, let me ask a question about that last page.
Sure.
The side yard setback on the west side being reduced from 10 feet to 0, isn't there a common wall feature between properties in that area?
Yes, and we do have the residential single family, it is in the residential single family zone, which requires 10 feet. However, this neighborhood does have that unique attribute.
That's because that's the way the project was built in the first place.
Right.
Okay,
And they're built like a townhome style.
right, I understand.
Okay. Just to give a little bit of a aerial of where 4602 Park Mirasol is located, you'll see that Park Mirasol is actually located here. To the north, you have the Calabasas and Tenton Swim Center. Then you have Avanti to the northwest, the Commons to the west, Calabasas Park HOA down here to the south, and then you have Las Villas HOA down here to the southeast. This is the project site, and this is just an up-close aerial of it. So as you can see here, it does have an irregular lot shape. This here is an HOA-owned space, and the rear yard faces the lake. Just a little background, as we mentioned earlier, the subject homes were built and a townhome style residence was constructed in 1970 as part of Tract 28212. All of these homes in this community were rezoned residential single family after the city's incorporation. And as a result of the rezoning, each home became legal nonconforming because they do not comply with development standards for the RS zone, specifically site coverage and setbacks. The neighborhood characteristics. So the lot size in this particular neighborhood range from about 2,940 square feet to 5,170 square feet. A typical lot width is approximately 30 feet with a few exceptions, and lot lengths range between 97 feet and 128 feet, measured between the midpoints of the front and rear lot lines. And there are irregular lot shapes, as we mentioned in the previous slide here. As you can see, they're a lot smaller and vary in size. The home size range from about 1,746 square feet to 434 square feet. The average house size is 2,532 square feet. Homes are 2-story, and the average site coverage for the neighborhood is 55% with a range of 33 to 78%. Here on this map, we have here a couple of sites to just kind of show that what a typical lot width and length looks like. So this is the one that's kind of the smallest lot, 97 feet, but has a 30 feet width. This 4647 has 100 feet. Park Mirasol over here has 128. 4618 also has 148, and 4615 has 105. But they all typically range from about 35 feet with the exception of 4647, which has 50 feet width. Just to give you kind of a picture of what the townhomes look on Park Mirasol, this is a lot of them have the common party wall. So as you can see, they're all fairly close together, and you can see that setbacks are truly an issue in this particular area. And you can see here again, the common walls here. And sometimes there's a 5-foot separation. So a little bit more about the subject site. As I mentioned earlier, the length is 128 feet, and the width at the front is about 18.5 here at the driveway. And it's about 31 feet here, and at the wider area is about 35 feet. So it does have varying lot widths. This is the site photo from the front. So this is the driveway here and the garage, and this here is the open space property to the right. Here we have the proposed floor plan where you have the garage, the living room and dining room. There's a mud room and an outside patio here. The second floor has the master bedroom, a study, a laundry room, and 2 bedrooms. And it does have a balcony that it extends here. The design of the home is a contemporary home, and the colors and materials for the roof are charcoal gray. Cement plaster is a crystal white smooth trill. There's stone headers of the Royal Mosa gray, and windows and garage doors and gates are in espresso color. ARP looked over this project and recommended approval of the design on November 22nd, 2019. Here is a rendering of the single family residence, the proposed project from the lakeside. So this is from the rear. This is the proposed project from the east. So this here is actually the entryway, and this here is the open space. From the southwest, so this would be this would be from the southwest point of view. The application in hand is a site plan review. The site plan review is for the proposed 3,660 square feet residence. It is consistent with the size of homes in the neighborhood, which range from 1,746 square feet to 4,034 square feet. The proposed two-story residence is also consistent with the height of the other homes in the neighborhood, which are also 2-story. The proposed contemporary design is compatible with the mix and designs of the neighborhood. As you can see, it's an eclectic neighborhood. The proposed residence includes appropriate massing, articulation, color materials, and landscaping elements that the residence fits within the community and is compatible with its surrounding. Again, as I mentioned earlier, ARP recommended approval of this design on November 22nd, 2019. The variances requested are for the east side yard setback at 4 feet, 6 inches, 5/8. West side yard setback at 0 feet. Rear yard at 15 feet, 6 1/8 inches, and to exceed the site coverage at 61% when the required is 50%. I'm going to go over what the setback variances are and go over kind of the site plan. So first I'm going to show this here. So with the residential set requirements, this would be the 10-foot required side yard setback if we didn't grant the variances for the side yards. So as you can see here, it takes away a big portion of the house. They're proposing a 0-foot lot line on this side and 4 feet, 6 5/8 on this side here. So then they almost are about 5 feet. And I also wanted to mention that the fire department did approve that setback on that side. The required rear yard variance is 20 feet, and the proposed is 15 feet, 6 inches, and 1/8. The 22 square feet that staff is recommending denial, or the area that is affected, is a 225 square, this blue shaded area that's 22 square feet. The side yard setback variances, typical lot widths in the neighborhood are approximately 30 feet with a few exceptions. The proposed project includes requests for reductions to 0 on the west side of the common wall and 4 feet, 6 5/8 inches on the east side. Subject lot generally has a lot width, excluding the flag-like portion of between 31 and 35 feet. Compliance with the side yard setback requirements would render a development envelope width of approximately 10 to 15 feet, which does not allow for reasonable development width. Additionally, the townhome style development features a common wall with the neighbor to the west. Therefore, findings for reduction both of the side yard setbacks can be justified. The rear yard variance. Lot lengths in the neighborhood range from 97 feet to 128 feet in length, measured from the midpoint of the front and rear lot lines. The range of home sizes in the neighborhood is 1,746 to 4,034 square feet, with an average home size of 2,532 square feet. The subject parcel is 128 feet long, which is one of the 2 longest parcels in the neighborhood. The proposed encroachment in the rear yard setback is approximately 5 feet and affects approximately 22 square feet of the proposed first floor. The rear yard variance. The city may grant a variance provided it can find that there is a special circumstance or unusual characteristic of this property that makes strict application of this code deprive the property owner of privileges enjoyed by others, and that granting the variance is necessary to preserve substantial property rights possessed by others. In this case, the proposed residence is 3,660 square feet in the neighborhood that ranges between 1,746 square feet and 4,034 square feet, with an average size of 2,532 square feet, and on one of the 2 longest properties in the neighborhood at 128 feet. Additionally, the proposed encroachment into the rear yard setback affects only approximately 22 square feet of this first floor. Consequently, a design that meets the rear yard setback requirement would still yield a residence that is 3,638 square feet, which is still on the high side of the average size home sizes in the neighborhood and approximately 45% greater than the average home size. Therefore, granting a rear yard variance does not deprive the property owner of privileges enjoyed by others and is not necessary to preserve substantial property rights possessed by others. Therefore, staff is recommending denial of the rear yard variance and therefore the project without prejudice, so that the property owner has the opportunity to resubmit an alternative design that meets the rear yard setback requirement. The site coverage variance. Proposed site coverage for the subject property is 61%, which exceeds the city's maximum of 50%. Lot sizes in this neighborhood are very small, ranging in sizes between 2,938 square feet and 5,177 square feet. Additionally, existing site coverages in the neighborhood range from 33 to 78%, with an average of 55%, which exceeds the code requirement. The subject property at 4,040 square feet is proposing 61% site coverage, which is characteristic of the development pattern in the neighborhood. Therefore, findings for a variance for site coverage are supportable to preserve the rights possessed by others in the neighborhood. The findings that staff is required to make are in section 17.62.080. And as a result, they cannot be made, and they are contained in the PC resolution 2020-207. The recommended action is that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 2020-702 denying file number site plan review 2019-002 and variance 2019-002 without prejudice. That concludes staff presentation. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions.
Before we move on, Matt, would you, I guess, describe for the viewing audience and anybody who might not have been through a process like this before what denial without prejudice involves and what it means and what are the outcomes that might occur after that?
Happy to. Denial without prejudice means that the project would be denied without blocking the ability of the applicant to try again with a new or similar project within a year. If a project is denied with prejudice, that blocks the same project from being applied for within a year. The intention here would be, if the applicant were so willing, to enable that the application be adjusted to not require the rear yard variance setback and then try again. And that could come through without having that 1 year delay. They could apply for that, amend their existing application and bring that forward. And that's worth noting. The options for the commission tonight are to go with staff's recommended action, deny the rear yard setback variance, thereby deny the project without prejudice, to find that the variance could be approved and direct staff to return with a resolution approving the project, or to continue the matter for the applicant to further evaluate whether they can meet staff's recommendation of deleting the rear yard variance and adjusting the project as necessary to do so, and then perhaps come back to the commission with the recommendation of approval if the project would then only require the other three variances for the 2 side setbacks and lot coverage.
Thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions or initial comments from the commissioners? If we could, let's drop the slideshow at this point. We'll come back to that as we may need.
And I would suggest, if I could, that we might confine this first moment to questions, then take public comment, then commission opinions.
Of course. I see, Peter, you have your hand up. You have a question?
I do. First of all, thank you for that excellent report. I'm left with a couple of questions on the setbacks. In particular, the second floor terrace is also 15.6 1/4 from the rear yard. Could you explain to us where that is allowed?
If you want, I can answer that. The structural setbacks refer to the distance between the property line and the actual house, but decks and balconies are allowed to project into required setbacks. And so the setback, the deck actually meets the setback requirement, whereas the corner of the house that you saw in the slide earlier does not.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the fire department had approved a setback. Are you referring to the one that's less than 5 feet for access?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else or anybody else? Yes, John.
In the exhibit, Brenda, in Exhibit D, which is the minutes of the September 27, 2019 ARP meeting, there is a reference to, this is on page 2 of those minutes. It says, Mr. Ronenberg provided the ARP with a letter from the HOA. I don't know what that letter says. Is that letter part of the packet?
It is not part of this packet.
And so my question is, number one, what is the HOA that governs this site? What's the name of it? Is that the Las Feliz or Las?
I believe this is Calabasas Park Homeowners Association. Is
So
it
it's not, okay. I really, okay, so whatever it is, I guess I'd like to know what that letter said. If the HOA in September of 2019 had a view on this project, that would be interesting to know.
And just for the sake of time management here, if staff is able to dig up the letter and bring it in, let's not hold things up for that, but let's review.
Yeah, I actually have it in my email. I will look it up.
Okay.
Fine, but let's not do it at this moment. That's a question. We'll get answers. Anybody else have a question?
I'm not done. The other question I have is, there's a property 4606 Park Mirasol, which is listed in the staff report as, if I'm reading this correctly, 3,885 square feet home. This is on the last page of the staff report. I was trying to get a feel for the size of this home versus other homes on the street. And you've already talked about 4615, and you said it's bigger than what had been reported in the staff report. We've got a new number. That's fine. And then you have some other houses that you have the square footage of. But I was interested in 4606 because it's, according to your report, 3,885 square feet. And I'm just wondering why that wasn't wasn't addressed in the report, in the PowerPoint today. I guess if you can just answer, is your report correct that there is another house that is 3,885 square feet on the same block?
Yes, however, the focus was to show the biggest house, to show kind of the outliers.
Okay, so this is the second biggest. All right. Thank you very much. I'll save my questions after the public hearing.
Are there any other questions from commissioners, or are there any other issues from staff before I open the public hearing?
I want to make sure that I'm clear. John, are you saying it's the second largest, it would be the second largest on the street or in the neighborhood? Because there were larger ones in the neighborhood, if I'm not mistaken.
All I did was look at the all of the Park Mirasol square footages that are on page 13 and 14 of the staff report. And I looked at the size of the proposed project, which is 3660, and I scratched my head and I said, what are the bigger ones?
Okay, so you're talking about on the street, not in the neighborhood.
Correct. Yep.
All right.
Yes, Peter. I think, Peter, you're muted.
Thank you for that. One more question on the plan, if I can. There appears to be an existing wall and planter in the bottom left-hand corner of the site plan that's existing, and part of it appears to be kept. Is that a property line wall that is mistakenly not on the property line, or is that a larger structure? I'm not quite understanding how that fits in.
Brenda, do we have a photo again of that? Maybe we
Yeah.
can pull up the PowerPoint again and take a look at the picture from that side and get an answer to that. I believe the wall is slightly off the property line, and the property owner and the architect may be also able to address that.
Okay, I'll wait for the applicant then.
That's good.
Is it this planter here? Oh, let me share my screen, sorry.
John, did you have your hand up again?
Oh.
Okay. Michael, anybody?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention to John, I saw that house because it's really close to the one at issue here. And it's like, it's a double townhouse. It's like a house with a dividing wall right down the middle.
Oh.
So it's like two houses that have been combined.
With one address, huh?
Yeah, it seems to only have, I looked at that because I couldn't figure it out. It only has one address now, and it's all painted the same color, but it's got 4-car garage, so you know it's different from the other ones.
Huh.
It's got two 2-car garages.
And I have a question about the interface between this property and the proposed additions to it, and what I believe will be a homeowners association, probably the Calabasas Park Homeowners Association common area or open space, because it is actually significantly improved. It's also probably under the management of the Landscape and Maintenance District number 22. So are there issues that have been addressed dealing with the interface between the private property lot that we're talking about and the common area territory, which is it's a very small pocket park-like place? I've actually walked the lake myself many times and admired that that design that Calabasas Park has installed throughout the the region. So this is kind of a regional thing, and there are so many people who walk the lake that I'd want to at least understand what impacts might occur by virtue of the significant increase in the size of the utilization of the property next to the common space and the walkway around the lake.
At this time, we haven't heard anything from the HOA besides for the design component.
And did our staff analyze the interface between the open space and the project proposal?
to analyze the interface, is there something specific you're referring to? Because they are developing entirely on their property,
I understand.
not in the open space.
Their property includes the view and basically the front yard that is open space and common area. So it's not, I haven't got a problem with any of it, other than I just want to understand if it has been evaluated and if there has been discussion about what the changes will be to the feeling and the utilization of the open space by the HOA.
At this time, there have been no discussion with the HOA or the LMD management as to the changes in feeling, because the development is not proposing to encroach into the HOA or LMD maintained areas. Recognizing that you're right, there may be some changes in the experience or the feeling of those areas, but because there's not going to be physical encroachment, there have not been discussions at this time.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions or comments? Question like. Okay, then I would like to open the public hearing. And you probably have a queue of speakers. I do not have the cards that I usually have. So Brenda or Julie, I'm counting on you to help us queue the folks up and tell us who they are. And
Sure.
and we'll have to determine, I'm sure we'll probably hear from the applicant first, but we do have some public comment to at least mention ultimately. And there may be public speakers who are in the neighborhood or who have issues with the proposal that's being made. So if you'd help me identify the first, let's say, first three speakers.
Sure.
No.
Well, I do know that the applicant is Janet Spinks. Would you like to take her first?
If that's the first application to speak we got, that's fine with me. If
Sure.
that's what they would like. And if there are a team of presenters, if that first speaker would let us know who all are interested in speaking and what issues they need to bring up, so we can also manage the time appropriately.
Sure. And how many minutes would you like to give each speaker?
Well, let's start with 3 to 5 for the primary presentation, and we'll go from there. And I'm not looking to have people pass their time around. I don't know whether commissioners think differently, but you know, if someone has 5 minutes and they donate 2 of it to the next speaker, so they have now 5 instead of 3, I don't want to get into that kind of a circumstance of trying to make a judgment every time someone speaks.
Okay. So we'll start with Janet Spinks, and I'm going to allow you to speak. And Janet, if you just unmute yourself, you will be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
You'll need to speak up just a little bit, please.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, that would be a minimum.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for hearing my project. I do and my client, the owner of the property, also would like to have a few words. So what I'd like to start with is I want to address your questions regarding the HOA letter. That was whenever we were before the ARP, and we have actually gone through the HOA process, and we have just a few more things to provide them, such as an irrigation plan and actually a legal letter which their attorney has to draft up. So with respect to the wall, the brick wall that you were asking about, that is on the HOA property. It really is on the HOA property. And we have been writing emails to the HOA for 6 months asking us, or asking them if we could remove that wall because it doesn't go with our project and it's not really serving a purpose. And I think it was inadvertently built on their property by accident. That's my assumption. I don't know for a fact if that's accurate, but that's what I think. So what I'd like to do is, in the package that I sent to you, if you could start out by looking at sheet A1, please.
Let me ask the question here. I'm going to hold up the document that I have, which is supplemental information, and it has yellow and green and a pink tab. Is that the thing you're referring to now?
No, I'm referring to the 24 by 36 blueprints, if you will.
Please continue. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So what I want to point out, this is an end property. It's adjacent to the open space, and it's coming off of the cul-de-sac. And so what I want to bring to your attention is that we have a very unique shaped property, in that it is not a rectangular shaped property. Not only is it small, but it has, as you can see, at the front of the property, about the first, 20% of the property is actually angled off of the cul-de-sac. So that's one issue about the property. And then towards the middle portion of the property, you can see that adjacent to the homeowner's open space, the property line actually extends to the east 3 feet. And that goes along for about 50 feet long. And then it steps back up to the east property line going towards the rear of the property. Does everybody see that? Okay, so I'm going to assume that you do see that. So then the other thing I want to bring to your attention is the rear property line. You can see it's not at a rectangle, and whenever we create the 20-foot yard setback, it creates an acute angle. So that's what I want to tell you about sheet A1. And I think let's go to sheet A4 for just a moment of your large sheets. So at the top of the page, the existing proposed residence, you can see the overlay of the new residence compared to the cross-hatching of the original house, which is still there. And so what we did, like I said, we angled the garage so it comes directly off of the cul-de-sac, and we captured a lot of that area that is currently driveway now in the current situation with the current house. So then if you turn to sheet A5, and so I want to point out also that the existing house is currently ranging from a 6-foot rear setback to a 9'6" rear setback. Okay, sheet A5. So I'm going to talk about, basically I will address the rear yard setback because that's what staff has denied. So as you look at sheet A5 towards the rear property line, which is to the right of your page, you can see the heavy dashed line, which indicates the 20-foot rear yard setback requirement.
Mr. Chair, this is 5 minutes.
Okay.
Are you almost done?
Almost.
Okay.
So you can see that corner of our dining room, living room is set back at 15 feet, 6 1/8 inches. Now, one of the things you can see is that little triangle there that encroaches in that 20-foot rear yard setback. So one of the things that I would like for us to consider, which I spoke to staff about, and actually many incorporated cities have this method of measurement in place, and it's called an averaged rear yard setback. So if you look at the little diagram just to the upper right of that floor plan, you can see where there's the small little triangle at the bottom of the page, and you end up with an average. You can also look at the regular floor plan. You also end up with an average setback of 22 feet, 3 and 13/16. And I will address this in another method as well. So now, if you would go to the package that you had at first, the exhibits with the little tabs, the exhibits A through C on the legal size paper. If you look at exhibit A, the red triangle, you can see that is indicating the area that I am encroaching on with the rear yard setback of 20 feet. So it's 5 feet 5 3/4 inches by 8 foot 6 7/16. And I will, this point forward, refer to it as 5.5 and 8.5. And that triangle is 22 square feet. So that is the extent of the square footage that we are requesting for our rear yard variance because of the acute angle of the property line causes an acute setback. And in this diagram, you can also see that while we're asking for 22 square feet, the yellow triangle is we're actually giving 76 square feet that we're not occupying as square footage for our house. So just to give you an idea of what 22 square feet is, 22 square feet is the size of a small powder room. It's also the size of a small typical dining room. And that's what we're asking for. So if you look at exhibit B, for example, if we were to provide a 20-foot rear yard setback, you can see that the very thick black vertical line indicates where our wall line would be. And this does a couple of things, and I'll show you in the next diagram. Number one, it cuts our living room drastically by 5.5 feet by 17 feet long. And so it compromises greatly our living space. This is our main living space on the ground floor. The other thing it does, because of, remember I mentioned the part about the east property line extending towards the open space by 3 feet, that occurs. And so we've taken advantage of that with extending the house as well. However, whenever it steps back, the house also steps back. So if we're required to have the 20-foot rear yard setback for this little corner, what happens is it creates a very awkward architectural corner of the house, which does not go with the style of the house that we've designed. We think it looks like a mistake, which it is. So if you look at diagram B0, so you can see these 3 blue boxes diagrams, and these are all to the same scale. And what this is the first blue box to the left is the living room of 4615, which is 16 feet by 25 feet. And it's 400 square feet. The box in the middle is 4625, which is 26 by 17. And the reason I am bringing up these two addresses is because these are the exact 2 living rooms that the Planning Commission recently approved for approval at these addresses. So again, 4615 has a 400 square foot living room, 442 square feet at the 4625. And my project, 4602, if we are required to do what Exhibit B states, which is provide a 20-foot rear yard setback, we are left with a 315 square foot living room, which is 127 square feet less than what the most recently approved projects have received. So then following on B1 and B2, you can see the responding living rooms of those two properties. If you look at Exhibit C, so a different approach, if we did implement the 20-foot rear yard setback and angle the wall as was one of the suggestions, again, we just repeat this acute angle of the rear yard property line. So we end up creating 92 unusable space, 92 square feet of unusable space. And we have an acute angle, which I think you could probably put a plant there, but I mean, it's not usable square footage. This would also increase our house size to 3697 square feet instead of 3660. Also what it does, again, same as what occurred at Exhibit B, is it continues that very awkward corner where the rear yard setback intersects with the extended property and the extended house and so on and so forth.
Let me ask, we understand the train of logic here and I've seen the diagrams. Are there other issues that you wish to bring up or address in regards to the entire project?
Well, that really gives you an idea of what we're asking for in terms of the rear yard setback. And we feel that, you know, there are other houses on this cul-de-sac that, you know, we were, you know, just trying to build within keeping of what's in the existing neighborhood. And we feel that many of the other homes are exceeding what we're proposing, like the house size. There are two, as you mentioned before, there are two houses that exceed the square footage of our project. And we feel like the lot width of our project is within the range of the other projects. I disagree with staff in terms of I agree with 128 feet long, but I do believe that 4618 is 132 feet long, and I'm accessing the assessor's map. There are 4 other projects that also are 126 feet long, 123 feet long, and 128 feet long. Now that's something we can't really change. However, saying that of the end properties, the end lots, 2 of them have one setback. 2 of the houses, 2 of the properties have one setback that is less than code. And most of the other properties have reduced setbacks at both the front and the rear property setback requirements. So I wanted to also bring to your attention 4624, which is a very similar shape to our project and similar in shape. It's adjacent to the open space. It is a larger lot than ours at 4,255, and it's a little bit wider than ours, and it has a 3 feet side yard setback. It also has in the front a 20-foot front yard setback, and its rear setback is 12 feet. But it also has the advantage of being wider than my property, but it also has a 12-foot rear yard setback. Also, my client is texting me to let you know about the setbacks of the 2 new projects that you recently approved, which is 4625 has a 7.5-foot rear yard setback, which you approved recently, and 4615, which has been built, has an 11-foot front and a 12-foot rear yard setback. And so I just want to bring that to your attention.
I'd like to make sure that if you have other members of your team that wish to speak, they have their appropriate amount of time to address other issues that you might wish to bring up. Are there any other folks who are on your
Yes.
application team who wish to speak?
Yes. The owner would like to speak. Mark?
Judy or Brenda, do you have the next speaker lined up?
Sorry about that. I have Mark allowed to talk. If Mark can just unmute himself, please.
And are they project team members? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I am the owner of the property.
Oh, okay. Well, then by all means, you should be able to speak. And
Okay.
I'll say that as the commissioners or staff either have responses or questions after the testimony of the public hearing, we'll bring it back and we'll get to the bottom of things. So thank you, Ms. Spinks, for your presentation.
Can I say one more thing, please? I want to just clarify a little bit. 4615 is actually a 3-story residence. That's one of the brand new contemporary residents. It is a 3-story home. That's the one that's 4,034 square feet. And in the staff report, you mentioned something about a 3-foot high retaining wall. Actually, that's a guardrail. It's not a retaining wall. There's already a retaining wall there adjacent to the lake elevation.
Again, what I will thank you for your presentation, and let's go to Mark. And if there are other members of the team, let's get through those, and then we want to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on this item. And then we'll come back and deal with the issues that have been raised and do our deliberations at that point.
Okay. Dennis, thank you, as well as the commission. I bought this house about 1.5 years ago, and I bought it with the intent on renting it or holding it for future use. As I got into as I owned it after a few months, I felt like it would be a project that would enhance the overall neighborhood. And I wanted to build a home that would be more in line with today's living, the way people live today in homes in open spaces with larger windows. I felt it would be a great addition to the community, the street in particular. And having lived in Calabasas for the last almost 20 years, I felt like it was a project that would be welcomed by the community. I think it has. I think we've got some really good feedback. And I looked at the home at 4615 was really an example of what I wanted to do. And I looked at what was approved and what was built there as kind of a way for me to move forward with my project. And it had a number of the features that I liked in a little bit more of a contemporary style. And so we went along with that. We did some research as to what the setbacks were, what the height requirements were, and what was allowed for this particular house. And I felt like we stayed within line of that. I don't feel that we're asking for much in terms of a variance. But I have spent a significant amount of time and money to get to this point. And I'm close to the point where I just keep it and rent it if I can't move forward as is, because if I can't build it for either myself, my kids, or to potentially sell on the market at a profit, what's the point? So I am at the point where I'd like to move forward with the project. I'd like to get approval for the small variances that we're requesting that I think are still in line or less than what has been approved in the past. And I think it would be a great addition to the neighborhood. It's a project that I've been excited about. I've loved the lake for a long time, and I've seen the homes around the lake deteriorate. And I've seen some people put some money into homes, but in some cases, I think they're band-aids to long-term problems. And styles change, and the way people live changes. And I'm just trying to do something that I think will enhance the neighborhood and is more in line with the way people live today. And also doing so within the same thresholds and confines of what else has been approved in the neighborhood. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm available for any questions, and I would respectfully request approval for the small variances that we are asking you for.
Thank you for your remarks. And our next speaker is?
Yes, Ellie Decker, please unmute yourself. Deckel, I'm sorry.
Hello, thank you. I'm a resident on the lake. My name's Ellie Deckel. My wife and I live directly opposite the property that you are considering. And we have a direct view from our property to this home. The home that's currently there is one that is sorely in need of a rebuild. It is perhaps one of the most unattractive homes on the entire lake. It has a very strong facing that faces much of the lake. And the design of this new structure that I've recently seen, based on the notices you provided, is significantly improved over what's there now. As someone who'd be looking at this house every day, I think it'd be a dramatic improvement. I think it's consistent with the recent improvements and upgraded rebuilds that have been done on the lake over the past several years, all of which have enhanced and enriched the value and the aesthetics of the lake. And I have shared and discussed with many of our neighbors on the lake this project as a supporter of the project, and have gotten a very consistent positive response from our neighbors that they agree this home would be truly an enhancement to the whole lake, not just to this house, because of the nature of the house that's there, the positioning of the house, and the design of this new architecture. So as a resident who would be directly impacted, we are supportive and encouraging you to support the plan as submitted.
I have a quick question. If you, when you said you're across from this house, are you across the open space that is between you and the subject property?
Yes, we're also on the lakefront. Our address is on Park Jacaranda, and the orientation of our house looks across the lake to the cul-de-sac, and to the long, sort of, I would say, the long eastern wall of the house. Okay. We face the eastern wall of the house.
But you are across the lake as opposed to the adjacent property across from the house on the open space that's between them.
Correct. We're across the water, but one of the closest houses across the water.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your comments. Who's our next speaker? Julie?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Judy. Hi.
No problem. Give me one moment. I have Estelle Becker. Please press unmute. Estelle Becker, if you press unmute, you will be able to speak. So sometimes people and attendees, they just want to be part of the audience. Oh, here she comes again.
Wait. Okay, can you hear me now?
Here we go, yes.
Okay, this is Gerald Becker. I live directly across from this project. We're at 4707 Park Olivo. This project is about 70 feet right across the lake from my house. My objection is, and certainly I agree that the property that is there now needs some refurbishing. But to put this size home on that lot is going against your codes pretty much. When I redid my house, my lot is 5,400 square feet, which is 1,400 square feet larger than that lot. I have 2,700 square feet, which is right at what the code says. I was denied a 3-foot variance on the back of our house. This was in 2002, I guess. We have a neighbor on Park Adelpha. He wanted to, after he did his remodel, he wanted to enclose the balcony out of his master bedroom. Would have added about 12 square feet over what the code said. He was denied. I just can't see what encroachment into the CPHA property, if that can be allowed. I notice in the elevation that there's no trees there. There are 2 beautiful trees right across the lake from us in front of that property now. Are those trees going to be removed? Those trees don't belong to the property. They belong to CPHA. I attended the architectural meeting, I guess about a year ago. And at that time, I believe the HOA was Classic. And they had sent a letter that they didn't want that size property built in their neighborhood. I'm not opposed to the design. I'm opposed to the huge size of this property. And again, it's right directly across from us. I'd be concerned about the size of the windows in the morning. Is the sun going to hit those windows and reflect right into my house? Certainly privacy is an issue, but it's something I can't argue about because here on the lake, everybody can look into everybody else's patio. But the large home that was built on Park Mirasol by Larry, I can't remember his name, that 3-story home. Certainly it is large, but it fits right in with the houses on either side of it. When you look at it from across the lake on the south side, looking north, it fits right in with what they're looking at on the other homes on either side of it. This home doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the design of the homes around it. And I really don't think it should be that big. So possibly to get it scaled down. That's all I got to say.
Thank you for your comments. The speaker request is for Estelle Becker. Is Estelle also looking to speak, or are you speaking for the family?
Mr. Becker, go ahead.
Yeah, that's my wife.
And does she wish to speak?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you. So you're speaking for yourself and Estelle.
Okay, let me get the next one.
Yeah.
The next one I have on the, oh, I have another Estelle Becker. Let's check this out. The second Estelle Becker I have unmuted. You can press unmute to speak.
It sounds like Mr. Becker did the speaking.
That was probably my wife too. I don't know why it would be on there twice.
Okay.
No problem.
So we can move on. Thank you for your participation and your comments.
Okay. I have next Sandy Gilbert. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Peter Gilbert. Sandy Gilbert is my wife. I'm at 4625 Park Mirasol. I'm sorry, 4652 Park Mirasol, down the street and around the cul-de-sac. The gentleman who just spoke mentioned that this would be an encroachment onto the Calabasas HOA. Would this be an encroachment, or is this a setback issue? I want to be sure we're talking about the correct terminology here.
Generally, the staff would ask you to complete your full comment and then they'll respond rather than
Oh, okay, sorry. All right.
dialogue.
So Okay, so I'm assuming it's not an encroachment onto Calabasas Park homeowner property, the association property. So if it's simply a setback issue, I don't have an objection to it at say 20 feet. It's an irregularly shaped property. This is the first meeting I've attended. I didn't know about the property till I got a notice and zoomed in and saw. I thought it was kind of an interesting looking property now that I see it. And I think it's fine. I'd love to see the neighborhood in this area. The houses all used to look the same. I'd like to see the housing stock in Park Mirasol kind of be upgraded and changed in terms of design and style and even size and other issues, even color. So I'm in favor of the project. And as to the setback, I agree with the applicant that it poses a significant design problem. It's only 22 feet, but it's on an irregularly shaped lot. And as you know, setbacks are probably best suited for regular shaped properties where you can have an even distribution of mass across the property. When you're getting into an irregularly shaped property, the fact that you're having an encroachment in a small area is obviously more critical to the builder and to the developer than it would be just a box being dropped onto into a regularly shaped property. That's my comment.
Thank you for participating this evening. Our next speaker.
I have two hands up, but it's Ellie Deckel, who has already spoken, and Janet Spinks, who has already spoken. How would you like to handle that, Mr. Chair?
There are no other speakers that wish to be heard.
I believe so. If there's anyone that wishes to speak, please raise your hand. I see none, so I still have two hands up for two speakers that have already spoken.
Right. Well, let's hold on that because there might be issues or questions that when we bring them back, they can address in addition. So I'm not closing the public hearing. I'm just moving to the the commission questions or comments. And then they might be addressed by Ms. Spinks and others. Commissioners? Yes, John.
So I'm still wondering whether anyone can answer the question whether the HOA approves this, doesn't approve it, has set forth the reasons why it likes or doesn't like it. So,
Commissioner Mueller, I can speak to that issue. I've had a chance to read through the letter, and the gist of the letter is, but you got to understand at the time, this was back in 2019, September 2019, and there was a slightly different project on the table back then. It's before it went to the architectural review panel. We received a letter by CPHA that says they do not approve of the project as it's designed. They had issue with the size at back then 4,300 square feet. They had issue with the design, that it was not Spanish Mediterranean as a lot of the homes in that neighborhood that were built long ago are. It had a third story back then, and they were concerned about the height and the presentation because of that bulk. And they did not support the exceeding the 50% of the site coverage.
what about the rear setback issue?
They generally spoke to setbacks. They didn't specifically address the rear yard, but it was generally a letter of objection for granting variances and for the residents at the time. Since then, I know the applicant has redesigned to be a smaller house. And I remember even back when we were working with the original application, there were a front yard setback request as well, and that was designed out of the project.
And no subsequent letter from HOA?
We have no additional letter. That's correct.
Okay.
So we don't know what their current position is on this project. We have not heard back from them.
I find that very odd that here we are in August 2020 and the HOA, which is obviously a player in this, has not commented, notwithstanding A, significant changes to the place, and B, the fact that the ARP looked at it again in November and approved. But if they haven't written something, they haven't written something. Second question, Mr. Chairman, in the exhibit that the A1 that the applicant submitted, this is a question for staff. There's a little comment regarding rear setbacks, and I guess this means in the whole neighborhood, and the comment says 92% of the homes have less than 20 feet rear setbacks. I'm just assuming that that is that the applicant got that information somewhere. I'd like to know if it's correct, and does it mean that 92% of the homes on Park Mirasol have real life setbacks that are less than 20 feet, if you know?
We don't know the answer to that. I believe, and the applicant, if you wish to address the architect again, may be able to tell you where the information came from. I believe it came from some old staff reports for the 2 projects that have been to your group in the last 5-6 years. I don't know if that information has been verified, and the struggle we have as a city is we have aerial photography on our GIS system with a measuring tool that can measure, except that from aerial photos with neighborhoods with a lot of landscaping, you can't always get accurate measurements to where the setback between the property boundary and the residences are. So it's very difficult information to get for us to be able to compare.
Okay.
Glenn, would you please put up the graphic that's on page 11 of the staff presentation titled Neighborhood Characteristics?
All right, Brenda, you mind doing that?
Now that's not, definitive, but it is representative of the circumstances that are being discussed right now. There you go. No, go back to the page 11. There you go. Leave that up for a bit because it is pertinent to this current discussion, and it might be actually helpful in dealing with the comments that have been made by previous speakers as well, because some of them are viewing this property from across the lake, others are neighbors, and others are participants in the distribution of the setback and the common areas that are there for the walkway or the running path around the whole lake. And it is, I guess, a surprise in a way that the CPHA or the Classic Calabasas HOA may not have been aware of or attuned to the issues that are being raised now.
I have one final question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
On Exhibit B in the packet, the supplemental packet we got from the applicant with the tabs A through C, one of the tabs is B.0. And that's the one with Ms. Spinks discussed the living rooms at other properties relative to the living room here without a rear yard variance. And so there was some subsequent information about the rear yard setback for the house at 4615 and the house at 4625, both of which are substantially less than 20 feet if you believe Ms. Spink's testimony, and I have no reason to dispute it. My question to staff is whether or not those houses, which Ms. Spink says were approved by us, I don't remember them, but that's my mind, whether or not we granted a variance in connection with those setbacks if they're indeed less than 20 feet.
My recollection is both of those projects did have rear yard variances that were granted. Now I don't have the dimensions for 4625, but we do have on this picture the dimensions of the lot for 4615, and you'll note that this lot is 105 feet long versus 128 feet long for the subject property. But basically with variances, each property and each project is unique to itself. And so generally we don't point at other lots and say, since they all have variances, this one deserves a variance as well. Really the issue that we wrestle with is, and you'll remember that this comes up quite often, which is what's a reasonably sized house for a neighborhood? We talk about that quite often. And then we go to the variance finding in this case to really ask, is a variance necessary to grant this owner substantial property rights that are enjoyed by others on the block? So it comes down to this value judgment of what's reasonable versus is a variance justified to get to that reasonably sized residence. Our recommendation came out of the fact that we really wrestled with this a while and thought, you know, really 22 square feet, if you reduce the house, we're still looking at a house that's very large compared to the range of sizes in the neighborhood. It's not the largest, it's not the second largest, but I believe it's the third largest house here. So again, it was hard for us to justify the variance finding for the rear yard.
I'm not arguing, I'm just trying to get the facts.
Yeah, I just wanted to present our perspective as we went through, and actually wanted to applaud the applicant for working with us on the front yard setback and working with us so much on this. I think we just all kind of got stuck on this last issue.
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Are there other, John, that's it for the current questions?
It is.
Okay. Any other commissioners wish to raise some issues here? I don't see any hands.
I'm sorry, I did have one question for staff. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No apology needed. Just go ahead and ask.
Okay, there is a, and Mr. Chairman, if this is better for after you close the public hearing, that's fine. But in looking at the second to last slide where Brenda discussed site coverage variance, it basically seems to me that staff is saying we have no problem with the site coverage variance because greater than 50% site coverage is characteristic of the development pattern in the neighborhood. So it seems to me, my question is, why staff, do you have no problem approving a variance with respect to site coverage because it is characteristic of development pattern, but you don't approve a rear setback variance because you don't want to look at the other properties and their characteristics and whether or not they are within a development pattern? It seems inconsistent. Now that may be later for argument, Mr. Chairman, but it struck me as a somewhat an inconsistent position if I'm reading it correctly, and I could well not be.
Well, I think the wording probably could have been a little bit better. I think what we were getting at is in this neighborhood in general, and it's the same with this property, it's a very small lot. The residential single family zoning district, if you were to create a new subdivision, has a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. So, and you'll remember the background discussion that we had earlier. We have a townhome style development that was created by LA County before we were even a city. We came in and for whatever reason back in the day, put the RS zoning district over here, which really made it difficult for us to meet some of these RS standards, especially in a neighborhood that has typically small lots. That's kind of where we were going with the argument. This lot is characteristic of the neighborhood, but that neighborhood characteristic in this case is a very difficult ability to meet site coverage requirements. So that's where we are going with the argument. Like I said, I think the wording probably could have been a little bit better on that. But that's kind of our thinking on that.
Thank you for that. And is that satisfactory, John? You get,
now I'm really done.
okay. Well, let's come back to this. Let's see if other commissioners have issues that they want to bring up. Anything? Peter? Nothing? Michael? Actually, I have to toggle because let's see if I can do that. There you are. And Wendy, anything you had, any comments or issues? Okay. Well, in that case, we did have a request to hear from Ms. Spinks and from one other speaker. Let's do that because it might answer some of the things that have been raised. And then we can have a discussion about the rest of the business. And I won't close the hearing until we're done with at least the participant question and answer part. So if Judy, if you would enable Ms. Spinks to answer or speak about the issues she wants to, that'd be great.
Okay.
Would the commission still like to have the graphic on the screen? Or can we remove that?
Well, yeah, if it isn't interfering, I actually have something to say about it, but
Okay. Just checking.
Let's hear the rest of the commentary from Ms. Spinks and other speaker.
Okay, so I wanted to address a couple of the comments actually, because nothing that we have designed is encroaching on the HOA property, nothing at all. So I don't know where that came from. The person who is opposing the project, he was asking about the trees. There are several crepe myrtle trees on the HOA property. Of course, we're not tearing those down or taking them out. The reason they are not shown on the renderings of the house is because then it doesn't show the rendering of the design of the house. So this is artist prerogative so that the ARP can see what the house design is, so that you, the planning commissioners, can see what the house looks like, etc. So I want to just be very clear that we are not putting anything on anybody's property. One of the things I do want to point out that the house is actually designed on all three sides of the exposed elevations, unlike the other end houses that you have adjacent to open spaces. In fact, when we were before ARP, they said, or one member said that the house should be larger because it is adjacent to an open space property. And we concur with that. Even though we have, like Glenn said, we have worked very closely with staff and tried to, you know, please everyone and so on and so forth. So I wanted to bring up that the elevations are all designed on all three sides, unlike the existing houses. With respect to the HOA, we have actually received a letter that has approved us with conditions. And one of the conditions, which I mentioned earlier, is to provide them an irrigation plan for our landscaping, as well as they need to provide us with this legal letter. And I'd have to look at the HOA letter to see that. Also, with respect to the letter that the HOA sent to the ARP, that was, again, at the very beginning, they were upset essentially that we hadn't received their approval before we went to ARP. And just a side note, they responded that they wanted our house to be Spanish, but our response to HOA is that there are no Spanish or Mediterranean homes on this street. So it was a moot issue. Let's see. I actually have the staff reports of 4615 and 4625 in my hand. I obtained them from the city of Calabasas. And it states here, 4615, the height is 34 feet, 5 feet on the side, 11 feet on the front, 12 feet on the rear, and with a 59% lot coverage. However, I think that has been updated. Let me just check, I'm sorry. 60%, because I think they did some work afterwards. So, and again, my information came from the assessor's map. 4625, which is the one that you recently approved, And as did you recently approve 4615. So 4625 has a height of 33 feet 4 inches, 5 feet on one side, 17 in the front, and 7.5 feet at the rear. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention that when we were working with the HOA, one of their requests of us was that we lower the height of our project. And so instead of being 35 feet high, as these two newer projects are close to 35 feet high, ours is 29 feet 10, or essentially 30 feet. So let's see. I wanted to also reiterate that along the east property line, because that one portion of the property jets out into towards the open space, it is not on the open space. It is my client's property. So I don't know if that is causing any issues. So, and it's that whole area where the rear yard setback of 20 feet and the setbacks from that corner at the northeast side of the property, where that setback is, that's sort of where the architectural collision occurs. And if you look at exhibits B, you can see that clearly, how that impacts the not only the design of the living room and master bedroom above, it also would seriously impact the design of the house. It literally looks like a mistake, and it doesn't go with the design of our house, and so on and so forth. Someone asked about the rear yard setbacks. I have gotten my information again from the assessor's map. I've also walked around the lake a million times. I've laser measured as many properties as I could in the field, and a lot of my information, as much as possible, has come from the city. And so that's what I wanted to say. I think that is wrapping it up then, in terms of what I wanted to say or needed to say.
Thank you.
So to answer your question.
What I actually would like to have staff address any of the issues that might have come from the discussions around the roof deck, because I think a good part of the top of the house is going to be available for occupancy. In other words, you can have barbecues or patio furniture and whatever else up there. We faced a similar issue when the Denovitz house was being developed, where he wanted an elevator and he wanted to be able to put basically a barbecue space or whatever up on the top of his house. And it ultimately, from my understanding, has wound up being largely enclosed. And I think that's been referred to as the 3-story house that was recently considered and apparently built according to the approvals that we gave. So if you have some perspective on how that permitted, but very unique space in the top of the house, particularly since we just heard from Ms. Biggs that it's less than 30 feet, by inches, but nevertheless, it's still well within the height limit envelope that is typically applied here. Was there any consideration to the issues of using the top story of the house? Staff? Anybody?
I'm sorry, that was a question for us. I don't recall there being an issue using the roof. There's a roof deck on this current plan. And I don't recall any issue that came up as a result of that.
Okay. The only other concern I had I've already raised, and that is if the HOA has not commented other than they want an irrigation plan for the landscaping on this property, which is appropriate and which is included. Are there any difficulties that the Landscape District 22 is discovering with the effects of having the construction in the vicinity of the open space or the park space?
No issues have been brought up by LMD 22.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other issues? And we have, do we still have one more speaker that wishes to raise some issues?
Mr.
I have
Chairman,
two more. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, before we lose Ms. Spinks, I did have a follow-up question with her.
Oh, please do.
Ms.
And then
Spinks,
we will go to the next speaker.
if I understood your testimony in this exhibit A1 that you submitted, and my question was on the rear setbacks, where did you get the data? It's very specific. Average rear setback data is 12 feet 6 inches. 92% of the homes have less than 20 feet rear setback. And I think I heard you say, well, I got information from the city and I walked around and measured what I could. So my question to you, Ms. Spinks, very specifically, is this an estimate on your part, or is this hard facts that 92% of each and every home on Park Mirasol has less than 20% rear setback?
Okay, can you hear me now? Because I did actually state that a lot of my information has been obtained from the assessor's map, which is County of Los Angeles. And so I've double checked with information from the city. And I did say that I measured some of the setbacks with the laser, but that's not doing field measurements by me. I'm an architect, not a surveyor, is just a secondary method. So I have actually obtained all of the rear yard setbacks from the assessor's map and documented them here. And I've also obtained some of the rear yard setbacks from the city. And so I have, looked at both methods to put everything together. And so typically there's in fact one house, let me see if I've got this right. Oh.
And Marina, I saw your hand up. I'll come to you in a second.
Thank you.
So yes, the majority of the homes do have less than a 20% rear yard setback. And yes, that is actually accurate.
Majority is 50% plus 1. 92% is a lot more.
Well, it's, I'm just looking at the data again. And if we look at the rear yard setbacks.
I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm trying to understand evidence.
Oh.
And so you have told me what you did. I think it's an extraordinary amount of work. You went and got assessor information on all these properties on the street and did what you did to come up with these numbers. So I'm not criticizing your due diligence. I just want to make sure I understand the evidence upon which a statement is made. And you've answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Can I answer the question about the roof deck? Would you like me to comment on that?
Well, Janet, just hang on a
Might
second.
suggest we take.
Our Director of Planning and Development would like to ask a question.
Okay.
I'm going to state that there's a very important variable to this statement about setbacks, which is that we are looking at different zoning around the lake. And so not every house around the lake is residential single family property. In fact, we have condos. The villas are a condo. So you have a different setback that's being applied. There is a very narrow range of homes that fall into the RS setback. So I think it is a gross overstatement to suggest that 90% of the houses around the lake should be judged by a standard that's not even within the zoning district. So if the commission wished us to look at that, we can hold this item over and bring you that full analysis. We have no problem to do that. But it is with different zoning standards that you must apply different rules. And there are very few single-family residential sites within this lake property area. So we can do the full analysis, it's not a problem, but I want to bring that to your attention relative to the granting of a variance, because what we might find is that 90% of the parcels around the lake are actually of a different zoning category as well. And that would make a huge difference in your deliberation.
Mr. Chairman, I thought I heard the testimony that it was 92% of the homes on Park Mirasol, not around the whole lake. Maybe Ms. Spinks could clarify, is your 92% number of the homes relative to Park Mirasol or more?
Thank you for that question. I was referring to the homes specifically in the cul-de-sac of Park Mirasol. I did measure also the homes on the portion from 4644 to 4698. I measured those on the assessor's map, but I have not included them in the comparison breakdown on sheet A1. So to clarify, I have only addressed, I certainly did not go around the entire lake and measure all of the properties. No, thank you. I only did the Park Mirasol cul-de-sac and that other stretch, but I did not include, I only included the houses in the immediate cul-de-sac area in my comparison.
And I see hands from Wendy.
I hope that answers that.
If I could jump ahead of Commissioner Fosberg.
And from
Thank you. I wanted to note 2 points. One, if the commission intends to, in the course of deliberations, rely on this rather particular and precise analytical data, I would recommend that you consider continuing the matter to allow an opportunity for staff to verify the numbers, both with the LA County records, LA City records, and provide a comprehensive assessment of the setback calculations for Park Mirasol. The applicant's numbers have been provided. I would recommend, to ensure a clean record, at least an opportunity to verify them. I realize there may be differences between the two as for a variety of reasons, and that would be for the commission to evaluate, but I would recommend, if you intend to rely on that in your deliberations, considering securing a comprehensive assessment. Thank you.
Thank you for jumping ahead of me, Matt, because I agree. I was going to say that to me, this is these numbers are significant. To me, they're important. So I think it's important for us to be sure that the data that we are relying on is accurate. And I wanted to ask Maureen, are all of the homes on Park Mirasol, the cul-de-sac that Ms. Spinks is talking about, are those all RS? Or are some of those the townhomes that you were talking about?
I would have to go back and take a look at our zoning map, but my memory from the Dinovitz project is that there are relatively few homes along that block that have the RS categorization because of their townhome design. So we can again give you that breakdown.
Yeah, Dennis, I think that this is information that we need to have. I think we need to have the breakdown of how many of these properties are these homes and get a confirmation of these rear setbacks on the like properties. I'm not prepared to make a decision without that information being confirmed.
And Wendy, can I add an addendum to your point? Would you Would you also like to know whether or not we have granted rear setback variances for any of the properties on Park Mirasol?
Any of the RS, or any of the RS zoned homes on Park Mirasol? Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Maureen, you had a comment as well? Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Peter.
Are we closing the public hearing and proceeding to comment on this project at this point in time, or still just looking for questions?
I'm waiting for actually this issue to be kind of stabilized, and then my plan is to go to the last speaker who has indicated they wish to speak. So, and
I could
Judy,
offer a suggestion.
well, let me just ask if there is another person looking to speak at this point. Judy?
I now have three, Ellie Deckel again, Mark Cantor again, and again, Janet Spinks.
Well,
There's no obligation to take speakers again. If there's new people, though, I would recommend taking them.
Say it again, Matt.
I'm sorry, Ellie Deckel, who has spoken previously, Mark Cantor, he is the owner, and Janet Spinks.
And my comment was that there's no obligation to take speakers again who have already spoken, but it would be good to confirm if there's any new speakers. It sounds like there are none.
There are no new speakers.
So you could, depending on the commission's choice, close the hearing or continue the matter. As we discussed earlier, it may make sense to leave it open, but consider continuing it if the commission is interested in securing that additional data.
Well, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to leave the public hearing open now, but I'm going to ask, Matt, may I leave the public hearing open and ask for the commissioner comments and or issues?
Yes.
Well, then I'd like to do that because, we have a number of folks who wish to comment and evaluate what we're presented this evening. So commissioner comments at this point. Peter, why don't you speak first because you've been the most quiet this evening.
I've been quiet because I've been taking it all in.
Good.
I'm a little concerned that we're focusing on the rear setback because the rear setback, I can understand there might be a need to give a little bit there. I can understand that there's other properties from the aerial view that I'm looking at that appear to have less than a 20-foot setback. And I would agree that the curvature of the rear yard makes it very difficult to design a house with 90-degree walls and keep that 20-foot rear setback. As I'm looking at this, though, what I'm really taken with is we're not just looking at a single variance for a rear setback. We're looking at a collection of three, really. The first one being that we're not even, I'm assuming on my part, the 0-foot side setback on one side, I think is perfectly reasonable and should be left as a 0-foot setback because that's the way this neighborhood is designed. But the second side setback of less than 5 feet and the area coverage of 61%, collectively together with this rear setback, this is just really leading me to look harder at how many houses in the area are of that size. And we have the second largest house on the third largest lot with the third largest site coverage. And we can't just compare who's got more rear setback. We've got to look at the size and scale of a house in the character of the neighborhood. And when we put all of those things together, it paints a different picture than just looking at the rear yard setback. So I want to hear what you all have to say, but as we move forward, if we're looking at getting more specific data on all of these houses, I would say that we want to be looking at all of these numbers, not just one.
Just to be clear on something, if I'm not mistaken, this would be the third largest house on the second largest lot. But I really would like to have that other information before we have a full discussion. It's not meaningful until we can discuss all of it. So I'd be prepared to move that we continue this until we get the information that we requested, but that's my take on it.
Michael, your thoughts?
Well, actually, I think they're asking for 4 variances, not just 2 or 3. One of them, I agree with Peter on this. The one where there's a 0 lot line on the west side, that I think we should grant. The one on the other side, it's a few inches off, I guess. I mean, maybe that's not a big deal, but we should discuss it. The rear setback, I don't understand why they can't just make a cutout there and add something on the other side, or because I just don't understand the justification. I think the analysis is wrong, actually. You don't look at other houses in the neighborhood that violate the setback requirement, and you see if this house cannot be built without without a variance. And of course it can be built without a variance. Just because it has a 350 or whatever it is, or square foot living room. I mean, that's not I know the architect said that's an extremely small living room, but that's not true. That's just not true. That people don't even use their living rooms that much. So I think the architect could adjust it and make sort of an indentation on that side and add something on the other side if they really need that square footage. The one that bothers me the most is the site coverage, because currently it's either 53% according to staff, or I think the architect wrote in one place that it's a 46% site coverage. I don't understand the reason to grant a larger percentage of site coverage. They're able to have a house there now without asking for a variance. I don't see why they can't be kept at either 50% or 53%, depending on what's the real number. And I think we need that real number. Looking at the new additions in the neighborhood, some of which are mistakes to me, I think that's immaterial. That's not the proper analysis. I voted for the last one mistakenly, to tell you the truth. The reasoning I was given didn't make any sense for allowing that variance. I don't think mistakes in the past justify mistakes in the future. I don't think you can give a variance based on previous mistakes or on houses that exceed the allowed limits. So if this applicant's already in compliance at 46%, then fine, just keep it at 50%. There's no reason to let it go up to 61% site coverage. By the way, the rear setback to me is extremely important in this neighborhood. I think people are forgetting this is not like my backyard, which really nobody looks at because I'm on a hill and nobody can really see my backyard. This is extremely important. Everybody around the lake sees this backyard. So the setback to me is extremely important. But other than failing to qualify for those 2 variances, the backyard and the site coverage, I kind of like the architecture. I think it's just too massive. I don't think it's as bad as the one at 4615. I wasn't on the planning commission then. I mean, that one to me looks like a wall and a shower, the front of it. I mean, I think that's just so inappropriate for the neighborhood. I'm surprised that was built. But anyway, again, relying on somebody else's mistakes doesn't justify further mistakes, in my opinion, anyway. It's again why I think we need a neighborhood preservation ordinance to avoid these things. That's it. Oh, by the way, as far as the size of the houses, the shower wall house, I think, is maybe the largest. The one that John mentioned, somebody should look into that, because those are like 2 houses stuck together, and it's really unclear to me what the real size of each of those. That, by the way, is like 2 houses away from this house. So someone should check the size of that.
Something else other information that I would like to have before we make a decision on this is the site coverage. I would like to see confirmation of site coverage of the other homes in that area on that street, because it appears that the vast majority of them exceed 50%, and I'd like to find out if that is accurate or if that is not accurate.
Well, one of the things, if I may opine at this point, there were a number of letters that we received for more supporting and observing neighborhood characteristics that some of them regretted were occurring. And I don't know if those were taken into account in the presentation that we're currently at. And if that were, you don't plan by polling, I understand clearly, but at the same time, everybody has to live together on Park Mirasol, and everybody who walks the lake has to realize that a good decision was made by the owner, the designer, and the people who are essentially regulating the public safety and the viewshed safety and so many other things that are really important to folks who live in a place like Calabasas Lake. So I have a couple of questions of staff at this point. And this is not to close anything yet. What are the consequences of continuing this? I know it's time and money, and that's always important to me. But in terms of the risk that these folks who wish to build this home or rebuild this home, they're facing a long process, maybe a lot of it self-directed, but at the same time, they've really maxed the use of this property, and it's being held up by the Achilles heel, it seems like, in a way, even though there are 4 variances being requested. So it sounds like there's a discomfort with wanting to go forward on the basis of evidence. And there might be some timing issues here that the staff would like to address. What does this add to our schedule to be able to do this? Or is there some way that we could lay some options out so that, since we were planning to consider this without prejudice, it might be best to say, well, can this be sent to the Director of Planning and Development for developing the information base that we all need, and the options for proceeding that don't hurt anybody greatly in terms of time and money.
I can start on that. In terms of timing, permit streamlining, we'll need to have a decision. Unless permit streamlining is waived by the applicant, we'll have to have a decision on this by November 7th. I'm not quite sure how that falls into our meeting schedule, how many meetings we have between now and then, but that's from a timing perspective. The other concern that I do want to raise is that regarding very precise information on setbacks and site coverage, the tools available to us, and I've been thinking right now ever since this discussion on how we're going to get this information. The only way to really get accurate information for all 26 properties is to have a surveyor go out and do that, and they can do it by aerial survey. The assessor's office does not have that information. The LA County, when we incorporated, gave us all their records for these properties. We don't have home plans. We don't have site plans. And therefore, I'm not quite sure exactly how to get that. We'll look everywhere we can, and if you have suggestions for us, we're open ears.
I think we would also ask the applicant to provide us the quote unquote assessor maps that they used in coming to their evaluation. We'll look at track maps, which typically would not have that kind of setback. The assessor's information we're privy to is really only lot meets and bounds. So we don't have much to go on. We'll do our best. I'm looking at your future meetings, you have a meeting September 3rd, which we're pulling together. We can't meet that in that time frame. And your next meeting after that is September 17th. But there is opportunity between those two or after the 17th to schedule a special meeting to revisit this project and bring back that information. So we're looking at 2 to 4 weeks at a minimum, or excuse me, 3 to 5 weeks at a minimum.
Well, let me ask the commissioners. In a way, this is a relatively simple thing, but very complex. We're talking about 22 square feet, I believe. Now, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but if the applicant and the owner are determined to have this 22 square feet, as opposed to, as Michael suggested, perhaps just thinking where else might you acquire the space that you need or desire. If it's going to take anywhere from 4 to 10 weeks to try to come up with this, that seems to be pretty extravagant when these folks have been working so hard, as have you, staff, on getting to this point. Are there any other commissioners that see that there are other sticking points other than the 22 square feet? And it's, I guess it's calculation, because at this point, to me, that's kind of a rare glimpse into the obvious. It's either you design or stick with the design demand that you get the 22 square feet so that you can have your master plan fulfilled, or you say, for the sake of time and money and pain and suffering, you come up with a recommendation, and we could literally approve the project based upon the satisfactory outcome, if that's appropriate, to put a burden on our director of planning and development to, marshal the forces to make it happen.
We could look at September 10th and make a commitment to you to come back then.
I think
with whatever information we could gather from now till then.
How important is all that information gathering for 22 square feet is I guess my point. And that's something that you all have opinions on. And ultimately it's the applicant that has to do the hard work of making a decision, and then doing whatever design work is necessary to fulfill with their own dreams.
Dennis, if you're asking the commission, I would have to say that the 22 square feet, again, is something I hate to keep focusing on. This is a request for 4 variances, one of which is obvious, the 0 square foot on one side. The other 3, on the other hand, collectively address the question of the size and scale of the house. And so it's not just a question of 22 square feet. In my opinion, do we need that exact measurement of the rear setback of each of the other yards to make a decision? I don't.
Peter, what I was getting at is that the mechanics of getting to that answer on the 4 variances is really contingent upon this one point. And the timing is of significant consideration for everybody. And at this point, we probably just need to ask the applicant, because the staff has recommended denial based upon the 22 square feet, essentially, of that variance. The other variances, at this point, nobody is, other than expressing their feelings about it, nobody is saying that that is a break point for this project.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I'm hearing Commissioner Kraut say is that the other variances, even if the applicant said, okay, we'll scale back, we'll comply with the rear setback, and we'll do this weird angle in the back, I think Commissioner Kraut is saying that's still not good enough because he needs to make a decision on the other, at least 2 other variances. Is that right, Peter?
Well, yes, I'm really looking at the variances collectively here.
All right.
Somewhere something has to give, and the variance findings aren't a numerical question for us. Our questions are Are there special circumstances which do not generally apply to other properties in the same zoning district, such that the strict application of this chapter denies the property owner privileges enjoyed by other property owners in the vicinity and in identical zoning districts? For me, that finding is fairly easy to make. Yes, this is a very odd neighborhood with odd lots and many similar odd scenarios. The second finding we have to make, again, is not a numerical question. It is that the granting of the variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by other property owners in the same vicinity and zoning district and denied to the property owner for which the variance is sought. And to be the 5th largest house in the neighborhood instead of the 3rd largest house in the neighborhood, or to be the house with the 5th largest site coverage or the 6th largest site coverage instead of the guy with the property with the 2nd largest coverage, doesn't deny this property owner rights. So I do not see that we can make finding number 2 collectively for this property.
Well, I'm going to say, we're going to continue. If we're going to continue the hearing to get data, I don't want to show my hand. However, I would say that if we received information that showed substantially all of the RS properties on this block had setbacks, rear setbacks less than 20. Substantially all of the properties had site coverage greater than 50%. And we had information that we have granted rear setback variances. Well, none of that is precedent. It is informative. And I'd like that information to make a well-informed decision.
Agree.
Then at this point, Matt, I think I need to go ahead and close the public hearing. I don't think we need any more information this evening because it isn't available in a way that would satisfy at least 2 or 3 commissioners' points of view. So
I would suggest that it be closed for tonight to be continued to a future night.
That it's better to continue as opposed to, ask for essentially a reassessment of the data set.
At a minimum, I've heard several commissioners ask for additional data on the other RS zoned properties along Park Mirasol, both as to their rear setback situation and as to their site coverage situation, to understand those, both the numbers and whether variances were granted. The other point I would note is that it would be helpful for staff to understand, or more accurately, let me rephrase that. I would suggest that the applicant consider the comments tonight and evaluate whether they wish to make any adjustments in the design they wish to present to the commission. No obligation to do so, none at all, but it may be wise.
That's kind of where I was going with my assessment and commentary, because it's unsettling to a number of folks who are commissioners. So it is ultimately still the choice of the applicant to pursue whatever they want to pursue. And I'm going to ask our Director of Planning and Development. There are 2 pathways here, it seems, and that is to continue or to, in fact, get a motion and deny without prejudice, and then everybody gets to go back to ground zero and figure out what they do next. And I don't know what the most effective way to handle this kind of a situation is, personally. So your direction would be helpful, Maureen.
My recommendation is to continue this. We'll bring back the 3 pieces of information regarding rear yard setbacks. We'll also take a look at those properties that are I'll call them the end properties, so that we also take a look fairly at the side and the front. That would address Vice Chair Crowded and Commissioner Harrison's comments. We'll look at zoning overall, because that will play a role in a setback question. And we'll bring back a quick analysis of site coverage in the area. And again, that will have to be by zone as we take a look at those pieces, and perhaps that will allow the commission to resolve some of the testimony this evening by the applicant and bring clarity to details not available in the current staff report.
Maureen, could you also look at 4606 and 4608, because that's showing up as a 3,800 square foot townhouse, which kind of skews the results. And there's no way looking at them that they're the original style. I don't see how one's 3,800 square feet. I think because they're joined somehow.
And tell me the addresses, please, again.
It's two houses away. It's 4606 and 4608.
Matt, remind me, did I close the public hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure of myself. I was making sure I didn't exclude anybody who wanted to speak. Yes, Glenn.
I just want to clarify, because we're going to be going back to look for this information. Are we talking about only the 26 properties we brought up tonight, or all the way down to the end of the street? Because this tract was built all the way to Park Sorrento, and then around the corner for a little bit.
I think just the 26.
Okay.
Even that's a lot of homework for again, that rare glimpse into the obvious regarding your rear yard setback. To Peter's point.
It is, and that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Well, but only the RS.
Yes. All this entire track is RS.
Oh, well.
It just, depends on how sure you need to be of, the experience in the neighborhood. And I think that the continuation is probably the better way to go, rather than, moving ahead and then denying the variance on the rear yard setback, because then that disregards the interaction of all the variances, as Peter's pointed out. So it looks to me like the simplest answer would be to ask for a motion to continue this to the earliest possible time that suits the needs and interests of staff and the applicant.
So moved.
And if I could jump in there real quick, we would recommend that it be a continuance to a date certain. I believe the date was September 10th, thereby avoiding the applicant having to pay to renotice.
Which is fine. I guess what I was trying to do is make sure that we weren't hurting somebody other than by the length of time, with financial or other hurdles they have to go through in order to get to an answer here.
So this would be a special meeting starting at 6 o'clock?
Yes.
And it would be September 10th. Is that what you're suggesting, Maureen?
Yes.
Okay. I hope that's acceptable, but I don't think, since we've closed the public hearing, that we need to go any further, other than that in order to get to a decision, putting my finger in the air with whether it's perspiration today or just water, the wind is that we should continue this. And Wendy's made the motion. Is there a second to Wendy's motion?
Second.
And is there further discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I don't know if I heard everybody. Peter, did you vote? I'll tell you, put your hand in front of your camera so that you're saying aye. All right. All right. It's a 5-0 vote in that case. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because I vote the same way. So the motion carries, and this matter will be continued to September 10th. And you'll work as hard as you need to in order to get the answers to the numerous issues raised tonight. And hopefully we haven't done too much harm to anybody this evening. Staff, applicant, attorney, anybody. So thank you very much. And thanks to all the people who participated in the public hearing process. And we listened, and I would just encourage staff to take a look at the letters that came in the last couple of days, or emails, to make sure that if there are significant issues there, that they at least are satisfied with the data that comes in from them, and that we've looked at it, so that if it comes up on September 10th, again, we've listened to everybody. All right? Okay. We need to move on in that case. The next item of business. Is there a director's report?
There's a very short director's report. Commissioners, given your decision to have a meeting on September 10th, I think we will cancel your regular meeting of September 3rd and move those items onto that meeting. We have a pervious surfaces discussion for Vice Chair Kraut. We have a story poll discussion for or the return of the story polls on that date. And we were going to initiate a discussion about the townhome overlay in this district. But given the fact that you have an open case right now, my recommendation is to hold that item over until this particular project has come to resolution. So you'll have Park Mirasol, pervious surfaces, and story poles.
On September 10th.
Correct.
And we're not going to meet on the 3rd.
Correct. We'll cancel the meeting of the 3rd. On Thursday, September 17th, so a week later, we have 3 projects for your consideration. A remodeling of Volvo, which was formerly Mini, which was formerly Volvo, and which was formerly something before that, and I can't even remember anymore. This building is quite transformative, so it's going to have a new life as a Volvo facility. We also have an alcohol conditional use permit for 24115 Calabasas Road, which is the car spot for the sale of beer and wine at that location. I will let you know that that is predicated on the sale of the property. The city is in the process of escrow for sale of the property which the building sits on. So assuming that closes, we can move ahead with that application. And then finally, a new home on Dry Canyon Cold Creek. So you'll be busy 2 days in a row, but then we're going to give you a break. So that closes my short director's report at this time. Staff has been working very hard on code enforcement matters within the city. COVID-related matters are quite extensive right now. So I want to acknowledge the planners who have been issuing temporary use permits for outdoor businesses and those reviews. I encourage all of you to get out there and try the unique al fresco patio space. Close your eyes, pretend you're in Paris at a cafe. They're actually quite fun. And I think you will enjoy the creativity of each restaurateur or business person. Even if you have your hair cut, it's interesting to sit outside and enjoy that atmosphere for that experience. With that, I have nothing more. Thank you.
Are there any reports or announcements from the commissioners? I would encourage everybody to go to the Savvy Senior portion of the website, and there are still many classes open, and it's amazing what the city and staff has done to switch from in-person classes, which were extremely popular and more than self-liquidating in terms of, you know, earning their way. But the classes are good, the attendance is huge, and the people are saying they're really enjoying that stuff. So if you want to get additional education or entertainment or things like that that are largely, via Zoom type meetings, take a look. It's really nice, and it's good to support our adjusting and creative staff and volunteers in our education programs here. Anything else? Then a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
I heard a second from Wendy. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for your service on an ongoing basis. And we'll see you on September 10th, if not sooner, on the streets of Calabasas, enjoying yourself.